Bombs are falling on Tehran right now, and the world will never be the same. On Saturday, the 28th of February 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated military strikes against Iran, a country of 90 million people, igniting what could become the most consequential conflict in a generation. But here is the question that matters most, and that no government has yet answered. Where does this end? We begin with what we know, confirmed and verified as of this hour. Israel launched what its Defense Minister Israel Katz called a preemptive attack against Iran in the early morning hours of Saturday. Shortly after, President Donald Trump confirmed in a video posted to his Truth Social platform that the United States military had begun what he described as major combat operations in Iran. The operation has been given a name, Operation Shield of Judah. It is a joint mission planned over months between the Israeli Defense Forces and the United States military, and by every measure of scale and ambition, it is not a limited strike. One US official, speaking to Al Jazeera, described American involvement plainly: not a small strike. Those 4 words may be the most important 4 words spoken by anyone in uniform today. Dozens of US strikes are being carried out by attack planes launched from aircraft carriers and bases across the Middle East. The strikes are being delivered by air and by sea. Explosions have been reported in Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah. Videos geolocated and verified by CNN show smoke rising over the Iranian capital. Iran has closed its airspace. Schools have been shut. Communication services in Tehran have been disrupted, and hospitals in both Iran and Israel have begun moving patients underground. What we do not yet know, as of this hour, is the full extent of casualties on either side. That information is still incoming, and we will not speculate on numbers that have not been confirmed. But here is the open question that will define everything that follows. Is this a targeted operation with a defined endpoint, or is it the opening chapter of a sustained war with a country that has already promised a crushing retaliation? That answer, as of right now, does not exist, and that uncertainty is itself the story. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back not weeks, but years. The relationship between the United States, Israel, and Iran has been defined by escalation, counter-escalation, and a cycle of threats that has never fully resolved. But the most recent chapter began in June of last year, when the United States and Israel struck Iranian nuclear facilities in what was known at the time as Operation Rising Lion. That 12-day campaign targeted sites including Fordow and Isfahan. It was described by the Trump administration as a decisive blow to Iran's nuclear program. But as satellite imagery subsequently showed, Iran did not stop. Instead, in the months that followed, Iranian authorities reportedly began fortifying and concealing nuclear facilities, working to rebuild what had been degraded. The Israeli military, in its official statement today, was explicit about this. It said that despite the severe blow Iran sustained during that prior operation, the regime continued efforts to advance production, fortify, and conceal its nuclear program, alongside rehabilitating its missile production processes. It is important to note that Iran has long and consistently maintained its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. That position has not changed. And critically, neither the United States intelligence community nor the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, have publicly confirmed that Iran was actively pursuing an atomic weapon. Yet the Israeli government and elements of the Trump administration have consistently characterized the program as an existential and imminent threat. That gap between verified intelligence and stated justification is one that journalists, lawmakers, and the international community will be scrutinizing intensely in the hours and days ahead. Alongside the nuclear question, there is a second driver of this conflict that has received far less international attention: the mass protests that have swept Iran since December 2025. Beginning with economic grievances rooted in the collapse of the Iranian rial and spiking prices, the demonstrations grew into the largest anti-government movement Iran has seen since the 1979 revolution. They spread to more than 100 cities. They included explicit calls for regime change, and the Iranian government's response was severe. During a White House briefing on Friday, President Trump stated that the Iranian government had killed at least 32,000 protesters, a figure consistent with an earlier estimate of approximately 30,000 deaths, cited by two senior Iranian Ministry of Health officials. These figures have not been independently verified in full, but they have been reported by multiple credible outlets and represent the scale of what human rights observers have described as a massacre of civilian demonstrators. This domestic context matters enormously because it is one of the factors the Trump administration has cited as justification for military action, and it raises a question that is separate from the nuclear file entirely. To what extent is this campaign also driven by the prospect of regime change in a country already convulsing from within? On the morning of Saturday, the 28th of February, the strikes began. What is known with confirmation is this: Israel's military, in full coordination with the United States, launched strikes against what it described as dozens of military targets in Iran. The Israeli Defense Forces stated the operation was conducted with full synchronization and coordination between the two militaries following months of joint planning. Among the confirmed targets are areas near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in central Tehran. An Israeli official confirmed to the Times of Israel that the strikes were intended to target Khamenei himself, as well as Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and other senior military and regime commanders. The results of those specific strikes, as of this hour, are not confirmed. Iranian state media reported that Pezeshkian is in full health. The whereabouts of Khamenei, who has not been seen publicly in days, remain unknown. 7 missiles have been confirmed to have struck the district in Tehran, where Khamenei normally resides, which also houses the presidential palace and the National Security Council. Iran closed its airspace immediately following the strikes. Iraq followed, with the Iraqi Civil Aviation Authority halting all air traffic over Iraqi territory as well. This is a rapidly evolving military situation, and the picture on the ground is still incomplete. Within hours, Iran retaliated. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed it launched what it described as a first large-scale wave of retaliatory missile and drone strikes. The targets were not only in Israel. Iran fired on US military bases across the region. According to Iranian state-affiliated media, citing the IRGC, 4 American installations were struck: Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, and the US 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Qatar's defense ministry confirmed it intercepted 2 Iranian missiles using its Patriot defense system. Bahrain confirmed that its warning sirens were activated and that citizens were directed to take shelter. The US Embassy in Bahrain issued an emergency security alert urging American citizens to shelter in place. Explosions were reported in Abu Dhabi. Al Jazeera's correspondent in Doha described hearing missile warning alerts in Qatar. Kuwait and the UAE closed their airspace. In northern Israel, sirens sounded, and an Iranian ballistic missile launched toward the country was tracked. In central Israel, including Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, sirens followed at approximately 10:30 in the morning local time. At least one man in northern Israel was lightly injured by missile fragments, according to the Magen David Adom emergency service. A senior Iranian official made the stakes explicit. All American and Israeli assets and interests in the Middle East have become a legitimate target. There are no red lines after this aggression. That statement has not been walked back. The political choreography surrounding this operation is as significant as the military facts on the ground. President Trump delivered an 8-minute video statement on Truth Social, the platform he uses as a primary communication channel, announcing the campaign. He said, "Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime." He said Iran had rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions. He warned the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to lay down your arms or you will face certain death. He spoke of annihilating Iran's navy and raising its missile industry, and he acknowledged directly that American lives may be lost. The Iranian regime seeks to kill, he said. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. It is an admission of consequence that carries weight, precisely because it is unusually candid. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu framed the campaign in equally sweeping terms, calling for the Iranian people to cast off the yoke of tyranny, and stating that the operation will create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. Both leaders are now unambiguously in the territory of regime change as a stated goal, not simply nuclear containment. And that distinction matters for the legal, diplomatic, and strategic questions that will follow this conflict wherever it leads. It is also worth noting the domestic political dimension. In Israel, elections are set for October 2026, and analysts have observed that the strikes could, at least in the short term, strengthen Netanyahu's political position, as security crises historically produce a rally-around-the-flag effect. That political context does not determine whether the military decision was right or wrong, but it is a fact that belongs in this report. Now we turn to the international reaction, because the response of the world beyond Iran and Israel will shape the course of this conflict as much as anything happening in the skies over Tehran. And here we must be honest. As of this hour, formal government responses are still emerging. What we can report is this. The United States Congress was not briefed ahead of the strikes. Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, issued a statement condemning the administration for failing to provide lawmakers with real briefings or intelligence before the campaign began. That is a significant institutional rupture. The United States Constitution reserves the power to declare war for Congress, a provision that has been contested, reinterpreted, and circumvented by administrations of both parties for decades, but one that remains foundational to American democratic governance. The absence of any congressional authorization or even prior consultation raises immediate questions about the legal basis for the operation. At the UN level, no Security Council authorization exists for these strikes. That does not automatically make them illegal under all frameworks of international law, and that debate will be conducted by legal scholars and diplomats in the coming days. But it is a fact that must be stated plainly and without editorial coloring. These strikes were not authorized by the UN Security Council. They were not accompanied by a formal declaration of war from the US Congress. And the stated justification, imminent threat elimination and regime change, has not been supported by a public release of intelligence. The world is now watching, and the governments that respond in the next 24 to 48 hours will collectively define whether this conflict remains contained or expands into something far larger. Here is what we can say with confidence, and where we must be clear about what remains unknown. What is confirmed? The United States and Israel have launched a coordinated joint military campaign against Iran, targeting missile infrastructure, senior leadership, and multiple cities. Iran has retaliated against Israel and US bases across the region. Multiple countries have closed their airspace. At least one US ally's naval headquarters has been targeted. The operation is, by the stated words of both the American president and the Israeli Prime Minister, aimed at ending the current Iranian government. What is not yet confirmed? The full scope of casualties on any side. Whether Supreme Leader Khamenei survived the strikes targeting his compound. Whether the nuclear facilities targeted have been durably degraded. How long the operation is expected to last, beyond one source telling NPR that it was expected to last a few days. And whether any US ground forces are involved. What would tell us more? Independent reporting from inside Iran, which is severely constrained right now by communications disruptions. A formal Pentagon briefing, which has not yet occurred. An assessment from the IAEA on the status of Iranian nuclear sites. And a statement from any neutral party with ground presence in Tehran. This is a situation in which responsible journalism demands that we report what is known, flag what is uncertain, and resist the gravitational pull toward premature conclusions. That discipline is not timidity. It is the most important thing we can offer in a moment this serious. We close where we began, with the simple, staggering fact of what has happened today. The United States and Israel have launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran, a country of 90 million people, with declared objectives that include toppling its government. Iran has already retaliated, striking American bases and Israeli cities. The Middle East, a region that has absorbed decades of conflict and repeatedly resisted clean endings, is now at one of the most dangerous crossroads in its modern history. The stakes extend far beyond the borders of any single country. Oil markets, regional stability, the security of American service members stationed across the Middle East, the lives of Iranian civilians, and the architecture of international law itself are all implicated in what happens next. The questions that matter most right now cannot be answered yet. How does this end? What happens if Khamenei is killed? What is the plan for the morning after? What happens if Iran strikes a US base hard enough to trigger mass American casualties? None of those answers exist in the public domain today, and that is precisely why the world is watching. We will continue to report as facts are confirmed, as officials respond, and as this situation develops. Stay with us.